I wanted to just follow up on one point because you were talking about sort of making sure that people are there so folks don't get overwhelmed, which is a really different way than sort of what we've heard in different kinds of that different companies have used sort of scheduling software in terms of sort of making sure they have more like a minimum staffing level available. So just back to the principle, it sounds like you sort of have a principle of how does this affect the worker's experience kind of is what's guiding you. But I just wondered if you wanted to sort of comment on how you think about that versus sort of how that software is sometimes described.
Well, I think the idea, there's a lot of good software out there that we're seeing that's really helping with minimum levels of scheduling. And the biggest benefit to that is we actually do want to get really good at minimum levels of scheduling, because what that allows us to do is schedule significantly further out. So when you think about, states or cities that have fair work week where you have to schedule 2 weeks in advance, I think it's really, really, really critical and important that organizations are able to do that. And we're providing software to help support that. And that really comes down to what can you absolutely guarantee in terms of people and hours for as long as humanly possible. Like, I would love a world where we say, okay, this particular pizza shop needs 400 hours of labor. And we're confident that regardless of what happens from a macro perspective, we will need every one of those 400 hours of labor. Well, then I can look at the workforce and I can say, hey, we've got 400 hours a week, right, in labor that we can schedule that we know isn't going to negatively impact, right, the P&L. It's absolutely required. And so we can take that out as far as we need and schedule across that, right? And it's a very different way of thinking about that way. We can give people guaranteed hours, schedules much further in advance, and anything that has to fluctuate, week in and week out, because that does happen in our business, right? If there's a tornado, if there's a hurricane, if there's a blizzard, right? Things that we can't ultimately influence that are going to bring sales down. Or it could be 70, like we've seen in Washington, D.C. or New York this year, 75 and sunny in February. What does that look like? Because we know the registers are going to ring, or the proverbial registers are going to ring. You'll want to staff up for that. So kind of carving out that maybe 5% up to 10% variance and being able to toggle, with, adding or reducing labor, but keeping that baseline really standard. So I actually love the idea of scheduling further out, fair work weeking the heck out of our businesses. That's extremely important, and providing more predictable scheduling. So I actually found that leads to significantly lower turnover. Right? A lot of these things lead to lower turnover, even though turnover is inherent. You have to accept the fact that businesses like ours, we have largely a part-time and hourly work. Turnover is natural, but how do you curb it for those that have the opportunity to stick around?